Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on air producer, and I am excited for today's show because we are going to be talking about mass incarceration and exactly how that impacts you. And I have two experts here on the phone to talk about that today. I have Hassan Latif, he is Executive Director of Second Chance Center, Inc., and Felicity Rose, who's the Director of Research and Policy for Criminal Justice Reform at Forward.us. So, Felicity, I'm going to start here with you and give us a little bit of your background and why this is so passionate for you and why you needed to get involved at Forward.us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on today. I actually myself was impacted by the incarceration system. My father was in prison when I was a child, and eventually that led me to this role and this work. We just came out with a report that shows that I'm not alone by any means, that almost 1 in 2 adults in the United States have had a close family member spend a night or more in prison or jail, and even one single night can have a huge impact on a family. A week in jail can lead someone to lose their job, and there are all kinds of ripple effects from that. So that's really been the impetus for me and a lot of the impetus for Forward as we have looked at how to start reducing mass incarceration in the United States.
Wonderful. Well, and I think it's easy to get passionate about a project when you have been personally impacted by that. So thank you for sharing that part of yourself with us. And it's nice to see that you can jump on the bandwagon and fight for criminal justice reform.
Thank you. Yeah, it is easy to be passionate about, but also it's such an important topic that affects so many people that I think as soon as you start to learn more about it, a lot of people become passionate, even if they don't have that personal connection.
Absolutely. I would wholeheartedly agree with you. And Hassan, tell us about yourself and all about Second Chance Center, Inc. as well.
Oh, well, first of all, Felicity, it's nice to meet you like this. I hope we get an opportunity to meet face-to-face soon. I admire your work. Second Chance Center, we've been in existence now. It'll be 7 years next February. And I'm proud to say at this point that we are the preeminent reentry agency in the state of Colorado. And when you started talking about criminal justice reform, we're approaching it from a number of different directions. I've worked and had the honor of serving on the board of Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition for the last 8 years, and they're responsible actually for some very significant changes in the landscape where it concerns sentencing reform and reentry as a whole. So we were the beneficiaries of some legislation that passed in 2014 that actually gave us an opportunity to partner with the Department of Corrections and the Division of Adult Parole with folks coming out of prison. So we're dedicated to doing whatever we can to assist those returning from incarceration to get off to a good start. And we've been blessed to have a recidivism rate of about 10% over the last 3 years. We're pretty proud of our folks for trying harder than some of them have ever tried before. And we feel ourselves in a pretty unique situation as half of our staff are formerly incarcerated persons. So at Second Chance Center, we have about 120 years of cumulative incarceration time on staff, and that gives us, we think, a unique perspective about what our folks need coming out and what the challenges are going to be. And I think that it also instills a degree of hope in folks coming out, knowing that there's an entity that has experience and that's common to the folks transitioning after incarceration, and that their hope is that their outcome is going to be different this time. And many have been out before and turned around with a new case or a technical violation that sent them back to prison. So folks coming out now, I think, with the idea that things can be different, and that's what we try to promote.
That is wonderful to hear, and I love that actually most of your staff, you said 120 years of incarceration between your employees at Second Chance. I imagine that a lot of the people that come to you probably feel at home with that because they have somebody they can relate to.
Well, we call what we do at Second Chance Center role modeling possibilities. So from the early onset, and I don't mean to take all the time, but Second Chance Center began as a mobile unit in my car in 2012. And the first two people I was able to bring on once we were able to get a grant from the Department of Labor was Sean Ashi Taylor, who was our deputy director. And he caught a life sentence at 17 years old and did 22 years before his sentence was commuted by Governor Ritter. And Adam Abdullah, who's our mentoring coordinator, he'd done 33 years and 3 months in the federal system. And myself, with close to 18 years here in Colorado, when we started out this work, people were really kind of wondering, what are these guys up to? And understandably so. And we didn't really see a space for formerly incarcerated folks doing this kind of work out here. So it became our task to carve our own space. And the way we've done that is with the help of legislation, a number of pieces of legislation that have helped move the needle as far as making the reentry efforts of community-based organizations more effective and more impactful.
That is amazing to hear, and I want to hear more about how that's going for you, but we'll get to that a little bit later here in the show. Felicity,
Okay.
I'm going to switch over back to you and tell me why For.us is working to reform the criminal justice system in the first place.
Absolutely. We believe that for too long the American dream has not been available to everyone in this country. People have been locked out of the economy and locked out of opportunity by systems that are just not working the way that they should, and the criminal justice system being one of those. And so we think that there's a lot of opportunity to improve people's lives, improve the economy, and allow people to get back to those opportunities. And just let me say that, Hassan, it's really great what you're doing, and honored to meet you as well.
Thank you.
Awesome. So, Felicity, I'm going to continue with you, but Hassan, I also want you to weigh in on this question as well. Why should people who aren't incarcerated care about the mass incarceration?
Yeah, there are huge consequences of mass incarceration for not just the people who themselves are spending time in prison, but the health and stability of our families, American families, and the economy, as I mentioned. So I mentioned at the beginning, we just did this study. We found that approximately 113 million people, and that's just adults, have had an immediate family member spend time behind bars. And those consequences reverberate throughout society. So it's not just the people who are currently locked away, but over the past 40 years, millions and millions of people have gone through this system, and then many more millions have been affected outside of that. And that costs, it costs families an enormous amount emotionally, physically, mentally. There's all kinds of consequences from that. And then it also, it costs our economy $80 billion a year in lost GDP from people who have been locked out from jobs and have trouble supporting their families because of the consequences of their incarceration or conviction.
Great answer. Thank you for that. Hassan, thoughts?
Well, if I could, one of the things that we share with the community is when we first started doing this work, we really just kind of kept our heads down, and we were trying to do this work knowing we were under a very big microscope. We wanted to do a good job, but at some point we realized that we needed to engage more with the community at large and let them know what it was we were trying to do and the issues we were combating and challenging and being challenged by. Because we didn't believe we could do what we needed to do without the support of the community. What we tell folks is that 98% of the people who are currently incarcerated will one day come back to community. So it just behooves folks that we should be concerned about the treatment and what kind of things one has to endure while incarcerated, as well as the kind of assistance that's available to folks upon their return. And Felicity touched on it. In Colorado alone, it costs about $38,000 a year to keep someone incarcerated. And so what we think we're doing with this work out here, actually helping people to reintegrate successfully, to stay out of prison, to not reoffend, is actually a very cost-saving sort of movement for the community to be aware of. And so what we've seen over the course of the years we've been doing this work is the generational impact of incarceration. And that's I've seen actually 3 generations of the same family in a penitentiary that I was living in. And so when you see those kinds of cycles of criminality and incarceration and addiction and all these issues, it really begs the question, when are things going to be done differently? And I think that's one of the approaches that CCGRC in particular has taken to criminal justice reform, is what does different look like? And so that's the page we're on now, trying to offer some different approaches to reintegration, as well as different approaches to policing and sentencing and incarceration in general. We've seen over the last couple of decades the wholesale corporate takeover of corrections, as it were, with private prisons and private entities providing monitoring services and probation services and all these kinds of things. It's a money-making issue for some. So when you talk about mass incarceration, you have to connect it to the idea of commercializing justice in this country, or the lack of it, however you want to look at that. And I think that's an issue that everyone should be concerned with and concerned about.
I definitely agree with you on that, Hassan. I think one of the things that gets put by the wayside a lot is this view on privatization of jails, right? And how much that does have an impact. While that in the short term may make private business owners some quick money, the rest of the economy for Americans is at stake.
Yes.
Awesome. Felicity, can you talk about how the impact of incarceration impacts families?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of research that shows that even spending a single night in jail can be destabilizing and traumatic for families. And then the longer someone is incarcerated, very long prison sentences that exist in a lot of places impose a whole new set of challenges on families who can be separated for years or decades. And, I'm sure Hassan can speak to this, but some of the consequences that we see just in the research are, depression, higher rates of hypertension and health problems, kids struggling in school if they have a parent who's missing, and then the family just struggling financially. 3/4 of people who were incarcerated were employed in the month prior to their arrest, and more than half were who were parents were the primary breadwinners in their family. So you can imagine what that does to kids to suddenly have the primary breadwinner just gone, and maybe gone for years, and then trying to keep in contact with that person and maintain family bonds is also very difficult and expensive in a lot of cases where the prisons may be far away, difficult to visit. A lot of places, they charge a lot of money for collect calls out of prison. So you may not even be able to afford, talking on the phone to your parent. And just the emotional weight of that. And this, not to mention the shame and stigma that often comes along with that for families. So there's just a whole range of impacts that it can have.
Yes, definitely.
And actually, we actually need to go back even further in this equation, because just the very nature of the system of bail for citizens in this country is disproportionately impactful for communities of color, quite frankly, and poor people.
Yes.
So if you're not able to get bail and you're forced to stay in county jails and fight a case, then you're not able to work, you're not able to take care of your family. And the likelihood of someone taking a plea deal as a result of a long stay in county jail fighting a case is very high. We see it happening all the time. There are some counties that have high 90% conviction rates, and a large part of that is due to people just eventually copping out, taking the best deal possible so that they can hurry up and get this thing behind them. And it's unfair that happens. If you have money, you get a chance to get out and fight a case, and if you don't, you get to sit in county jails while your family suffers, and eventually you're forced out of fear or intimidation to just take a plea. In many cases, folks who have not actually even committed the crime with which they've been charged. We see that far too many times. So
we definitely do, and it's and the more technology that we gain, the more likely we are to see, when you get DNA results, people are going free once that technology came about. And so hopefully, as sad as it is that those people have served time, at least we can turn around with technology and make sure people are getting the justice that they do deserve. I'm going to switch gears a little bit on you guys and talk about how reducing prison populations can strengthen America's economy. Hassan, if you want to touch on that one, we have about 8 minutes left. Take your time.
Well, aside from the fact that the citizens are going to save taxpayer dollars that support, these booming prison populations. In Colorado alone, I believe the budget for Department of Corrections this year is about $1 billion. So when we talk about reentry support for folks coming out of prison, we think that there's the immediate impact of the savings on taxpayers from not having that person incarcerated, as well as joining the workforce and paying taxes and doing those kinds of things that normal citizens do. What Felicity mentioned about stigma, we've run into that just recently where it concerns housing. Housing is a tremendous issue for folks coming out of prison. Finding available housing, affordable housing, or landlords willing to take a chance, as it were, to rent to someone who was recently convicted or recently released. And so we've had to make moves ourselves at Second Chance Center to try to approach that and address that. We were blessed to be able to be awarded low-income housing tax credits. We broke ground on January 4th on a 50-unit permanent supportive housing development in Aurora, called Providence at the Heights, that will, in a year from now, house those formerly incarcerated, recently released, chronically homeless, those with disabilities, mental, emotional, or physical. And many folks coming out of prison are checking a lot of those boxes. What we're seeing are people coming out after longer and longer periods of time, older men and women, those with persistent and significant mental health issues. And those are all concerns of the community as a whole. And we think that I'm really encouraged that people are having conversations about these issues now, as opposed to thinking that it doesn't impact them, it doesn't affect them, it's not their problem, because it's all of our problems. Those in our community, our citizens that are struggling with mental health, substance disorders, and other kinds of stigma. So, yes.
Yes, absolutely. And congratulations that you guys broke ground on those housing facilities, and I'm excited to see where you are in a year. We may have to have you back on to talk about that.
Please, we're very excited about it.
Yes, I'm happy for you guys. That's awesome, and I love seeing that your company is moving forward.
Well, thank you. They have porta potties on the site now, so when the porta potties come out, it's official. So
yes, it is. Felicity, so how can we safely reduce prison populations? Because there are some crimes that definitely, people need to clearly be incarcerated for, but how can we safely reduce these prison populations so we can have productive members back in society?
Yeah, and I'll defer to Hassan on what's right for Colorado, because I do think solutions should be based in the system and the state and localities. But 32 other states over the last decade have reduced both their imprisonment rates and their crime rates at the same time. And in many cases, they've actually reduced their crime rates more than other states that have been growing their prison populations. So it's definitely possible. There's not a trade-off between public safety and a fairer, more just system with fewer people locked up. You can have both at the same time. And so I think reforming the bail system, as Hassan mentioned, is a huge thing that a lot of places are taking on now. There's a lot of sentencing changes. You can reclassify offenses so they don't carry felony labels anymore, and make it easier for people to kind of get their life back on track, reducing sentence lengths, expanding incentives to get people out sooner. Sorry, like I said, I'll defer to Hassan on what specifically would be best for Colorado, but those are all things other states have done successfully.
Oh, no, and you're hitting on all of them, Felicity, because those things are important here as well.
Awesome, you guys. I appreciate that. I do have one last question for you, because we are geared towards a business audience. I want to ask what business owners can do to support people and families impacted by the incarceration crisis.
Well, that's a great question, Alex. And the first couple of years of our existence at Second Chance Center, we really did a lot to go out and engage with employers and industry, and we really wanted to promote our folks as the viable employee pool that they are. We have a lot of talented people that, for one reason or another, their lives went off track and they wound up incarcerated. But we went out and tried to promote our folks truthfully as being this viable pool of employees, not only the tax credits that are available to businesses that hire formerly incarcerated folks and keep them employed for at least 6 months, but the fact that they can be bonded. Also, we promote the fact that our folks who are in community corrections, halfway houses, and on parole, that they have to take regular urinalysis tests, and especially in industries like construction, liability issues are a big concern for employers. So, us promoting our folks as, being those who will come to work and probably not be using alcohol or other drugs and provide a safer workplace for employers, that's been a big plus for us. So what we've had in the last 2 years is employers actually coming to us now and calling us when they need 5 or 10 or 12 employees. And we went to them and asked them what we could do to prepare our folks better in our job readiness classes, for specific industries. And so we've tried to partner in that way with employers in our community, and it's starting to really pay off. And we put the onus on our folks that when we send them someplace to get a job, they don't have to come back and thank us. We know they're happy. We're happy for them. What we need for them to do is do a good job so that when something opens up, their boss will come to them and say, hey, I need someone, and you can call us because we have someone. And that's kind of how it's working now. We have peer support in that way, people doing good jobs on the job and opening up opportunities for someone else to come. And we like the way that's unfolding, and we've developed even better relationships with employees as a result of having so many folks come on staff and do good work.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for joining me today on this hot topic issue that we have going on. And I love to see that you guys are putting your best foot forward in solving this incarceration crisis, as we've dubbed it here on Connect and Collaborate today. Be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. Find this podcast and more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. If you type in imprisonment in Colorado, you can find this specific podcast, and we will have links for you to forward.us as well as Second Chance Center Inc. so you can get involved. Thank you both so much. It's been lovely.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity.